This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githo-Ewart. It's Monday, December 23rd. This is Africa 54. Two of Africa's most vocal opposition leaders discuss ways to move African politics away from authoritarianism and towards accountability. Angolan Foreign Minister Manuel Domingos Augusto explains how his government is working to resolve conflicts in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. And why are Ugandans embracing equestrian sports? We'll explain. Opposition politicians in Africa are facing tough challenges, including arrest, intimidation, and violence, as they struggle to overturn decades of rule by the parties that originally brought liberation from colonialism. But they say their struggle is not only an African movement, it is a global generational shift towards accountability and a departure from authoritarian leadership. VOA's Anita Powell met with two of the continent's most vocal opposition leaders and reports from Johannesburg.
Being a member of an opposition party can be a struggle, but nowhere more so than in Africa, where ruling parties have strengthened their grip on power in nearly every country, and the result is often violent. That's something that concerns members of opposition parties across the continent.
The incarcerations that are taking place of opposition leaders, the violence that is taking place, is a deep concern. We're finding that it cannot be that you live in a continent where the leader of opposition in Tanzania is shot just for standing up for something. It cannot be that when you go to Zimbabwe, that in fact members of parliament from the opposition are being kicked out of their country.
That is something that Uganda's Bobi Wine, a musician turned opposition MP, knows all too well. He's running for president against one of Africa's most entrenched leaders, Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power since 1986. And it has been a tough road, paved with intimidation, arrests, and bans on his popular concerts.
I cannot be allowed to engage, to interact freely with the public. I'm a member of parliament who cannot be allowed to address his constituents.
Maimane says it is difficult for the continent to split from the powerful ruling parties that often led the battles to throw off former colonial masters. This year, ruling parties touted their liberation credentials to win the presidencies again in Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Senegal, and South Africa.
First, you must be liberated, and then soon after that, you must liberate yourself from the liberators.
Wine says he's hopeful, but also cynical about how that will go for him.
And we believe we're going to win massively. However, we also suspect that he's going to try to usurp the voice of the people. And my own prediction is that if President Museveni rigs the election right now, the people of Uganda will rise up against him.
Even when elections are fair, opposition parties face an uphill climb. Maimane's Democratic Alliance won a disappointing 21% in South Africa's recent election, losing to the long-ruling African National Congress. Maimane resigned as head of the party in October, but he says the struggle is bigger than one party or one country.
I think what has become true is that institutional politics is being disrupted all over the world. I think we must realize that the struggle that we're engaged with is generational, but not only that, it must move beyond politics.
That is surely not music to the ears of leaders like Equatorial Guinea's Teodoro Obiang Nguema, who's ruled his nation for 40 years, or Cameroon's Paul Biya, who's ruled for 37. But times and Africa's demographics are rapidly changing. And it's time, opposition politicians say, that governments do the same. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Algeria's powerful army chief, Lieutenant General Ahmed Gaed Salah, has died, according to state media reports on Monday. The army leader was instrumental in bringing down longtime former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The 79-year-old's death comes at a time of mass protests across Africa's largest country as people demand that the ruling elite relinquish power and that the influential military step back from politics. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has announced that the head of Land Forces, General Said Chengriha, will take over as acting chief of staff of the armed forces. The army's prominent role was underlined last week at Tebboune's inauguration, during which he embraced Gaed Salah and presented him with an Order of Merit shortly after being sworn in. Gaed Salah televised speech earlier this year urging President Bouteflika to quit led to the veteran leader's swift resignation. There may be finally justice for the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul in October 2018. Saudi Arabia sentenced 5 people to death on Monday and 3 more to jail terms totaling 24 years for the heinous crime. While reading out the trial verdict, Saudi Deputy Public Prosecutor and spokesman Shalan al-Shalan said the court dismissed charges against the remaining 3 of the 11 people that had been on trial, finding them not guilty. Shalan says the investigation showed the killing was not premeditated and occurred at the spur of the moment. Khashoggi was a U.S. resident and critic of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom's de facto ruler. He was last seen at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, 2018, where he had gone to receive papers ahead of his wedding. His body was reportedly dismembered and removed from the building, and his remains have not been found. The names of those convicted have not been released. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan are closer to aligning their views on filling the reservoir and operating the giant hydroelectric dam that Ethiopia is building on the Blue Nile, according to the Sudanese irrigation minister. Egypt is worried the Grand Ethiopian Dam under construction near Ethiopia's border with Sudan will restrict supplies of already scarce Nile waters on which it is almost entirely dependent. The foreign ministers of Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan recently agreed to work towards resolving their dispute over the $4 billion dam by January 15th, after meeting U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and World Bank President David Malpass in Washington. They are expected to meet again in the U.S. Capitol on January 13th. The Egyptian Irrigation Ministry says it is seeking to reach agreement on filling and operating the dam that achieves the interests of the 3 countries in a manner that preserves the sustainability of the river and the mutual benefit. There was no immediate comment from Ethiopia. The Angolan foreign minister says his government is working with regional bodies and international partners to resolve conflicts in South Sudan and Central African Republic. Angola is also helping to resolve tensions between Uganda and Rwanda. In an interview with VOA's Peter Clotty, Manuel Domingos Augusto says as head of the African Union's Peace and Security Group, his country seeks to share its conflict resolution experience with parts of Africa that are grappling with unrest and violence.
With the Angola's role in the African Union security organ, what proposals will the Angolan government support in resolving some of these challenges, particularly in South Sudan and the DRC and the Central Africa region?
In its capacity as the chair for the month of December of Peace and Security Council of African Union, we organized a meeting, a ministerial meeting of Peace and Security Council in Luanda last week, as well as a meeting of the United Nations Security Committee for Peace in Central Africa. During these 2 meetings, with several ministers from various countries of Africa, we review the situation. Angola is trying to play its role as one of the most stable countries in the region. Angola thinks that it can share its own experience on conflict resolution and prevention with the other sister countries.
Between the U.S. and Angola, looking at the partnership, Some people have suggested that the Angolan government should partner the U.S. in order to repatriate stolen funds from Angola, from the U.S. to Angola to boost Angola's economy. What is your stance on it, and what is the progress report that you can talk about?
The United States made itself available to help Angola on this endeavor of retrieving some of the assets. And I will not elaborate much because this is a work going on between the relevant entities, namely our Attorney General Office and the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General, as well as some of the federal agencies in the United States. So far, I think that we are happy with the spirit of cooperation shown. You know, this kind of things, they take time. And you must be patient. The most important is the willingness of both sides to cooperate and to partner. What is the good news on the Angola-United States relations is that there is an increase in confidence from U.S. operators in Angola. Just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, Chevron announced a big investment in Angola of almost $2 billion. So we are happy with this because we can see that in 2 years, with President Lourenço in power, we are regaining confidence of the potential investment partner, and that's the best. So that's why President Lourenço is very much engaged and focused on his fight against corruption, in order to and impunity, in order to set a really new business environment, friendly environment for partners, for investors, and also working on the changing of the mindset of the population.
Briefly, how would you rate the president's fight against corruption and impunity in Angola?
They are bearing fruits. It's bearing fruits. We have many cases now in the courts being trial. But more than this case, we can feel that there is a changing in the people's behavior. And not only by fear, but by conviction that that's the only way our country can be normal. So takes time. We are only 2 years on this fight, but the results so far are very encouraging.
Be sure to join Africa 54 on Tuesday when Manuel Domingo Augusto addresses concerns about how Angola handled the repatriation of DRC refugees who sought refuge in Angola and the importance of the diplomatic relations between Luanda and Kinshasa. Pirates are once again wreaking havoc on the African nation. The criminals have attacked 4 ships in the harbor of Gabon's capital, killing a Gabonese captain and kidnapping 4 Chinese crew members. Gabon's security forces, assisted by Interpol and other regional forces, are looking for the hostages and their captors. One of the vessels assaulted belonged to Satram, a maritime transport company based in Gabon. The captain worked for Satram, according to the Associated Press. The French news agency AFP says that 2 of the ships were owned by a Sino-Gabonese company that employed the kidnapped crew. The 4th ship flew a Panamanian flag. Attacks in Libreville harbor are rare, but happen frequently in the surrounding Gulf of Guinea waters. The International Maritime Bureau says 82% of the world's maritime kidnappings happen in the Gulf of Guinea. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Ugandans turn to horse riding as a new favorite sport. You're watching Africa 54, and we'll be right back.
neighbor, tell them say you there. Tell them say you there. Tell your neighbor, tell them say you there. Tell them say you there.
This message na for them bad for the Lord them. Would they sit down?
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. When Oluchi Odi gets into character as Bintu, a young girl displaced by violence in northeast Nigeria, the emotions are sometimes too much to bear. This musical centers around a girl whose dreams of going to the university are shattered when insurgents attack her hometown and abduct her father. It features an all-Nigerian cast of 20. A decade-long Islamist insurgency has killed some 30,000 people and forced 2 million to flee their homes. The aim of the musical, which is backed by the World Food Program, is to raise awareness among Nigerians about the scale of the crisis. But it's also to carry a message of hope, showing that humanitarian assistance and developing resilience can help conflict-affected families to rebuild their lives. Next up, step aside foams and plant-based food. The cutting edge of food may not even include food. That's the idea of the Aero Banquets RMX, a mixed reality art and dining experience currently on the menu at New York dining mecca James Beard House. In practice, virtual reality eating allows diners to see a VR representation of their food through goggles they wear while dining. Tickets cost $125 per person for the 1-hour experience that includes more than 7 rounds. And finally, with Christmas 2 days away, the U.S.-Canadian military officials in charge of tracking Santa Claus's trip are putting the final touches on their control room to make sure children everywhere get their presents on time. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, based in Colorado Springs, is tracking the jolly red-robed globetrotter as he zips around the world with his sled and his trusty reindeer crew, and occasionally an escort of 2 fighter jets. Tracking Santa dates back to 1955, when a local ad to speak directly with Santa printed the wrong phone number, instead directing children to a military defense operations center. Officers on duty fielded the children's questions that night and have continued to do so ever since. And that's what's trending today.
The U.S. Congress is in recess after the House of Representatives voted to approve 2 articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump, stemming from a phone call in July with Ukraine's president in which Trump urges an investigation of a political rival. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and Democratic leaders in the House must now decide when or whether to send the articles to the Republican-controlled Senate, where some of the top senators have already said they do not intend to act as impartial jurors. VOA's Arasha Basadi has more.
Last week in Washington, Donald Trump became only the 3rd president impeached following a full but mostly party line vote in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Today, as Speaker of the House, I solemnly and sadly open the debate on the impeachment of the President of the United States. If we do not act now, we would be derelict in our duty. It is tragic that the President's reckless actions make impeachment necessary. He gave us no choice.
Democrats accuse Trump of abusing the power of the presidency to benefit himself. Republicans call the impeachment process politically motivated.
For the very first time in modern history, we've seen a political faction in Congress promise from the moment a president election ended, that they would find some way to overturn it.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has rejected Democrats' demands to have key aides testify at a Trump impeachment trial.
I have yet to hear one good argument why less evidence is better than more evidence. 4 witnesses, only those with direct knowledge of the charges made by the House, only those who could provide new, relevant, and potentially illuminating testimony.
Senators would act as jurors in an impeachment trial. One of them said Sunday the charges against Trump are pretty thin gruel.
I will support the president in the type of trial he wants and the types of witnesses he wants to bring. But again, I also think it'd be totally appropriate to have the House put on their case, the president put on his case, and then decide what we're going to do after that point.
Meanwhile, Democrats continue questioning the president's motives.
If a president of the United States is using his office and the power of the presidency against a country that is dependent upon the United States of America, if he's doing that just to get a political advantage for his own personal campaign, that is a serious, serious matter.
Congress is in recess for the holidays until early January, when House lawmakers may decide on sending their articles of impeachment to the Senate for trial. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
It's time for Monday Sports Report. And joining us now is Sunday Shomari. Hello, Sunday.
Hello, Esther.
It's your time. Take it on.
Thank you. And over the weekend, Liverpool Reds pair Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah plus Riyadh Mahrez from Manchester City were named as the 3 candidates for this year's African Footballer of the Year award to be decided next month. The Senegalese and Liverpool star Sadio Mane will be the favorite for the award ahead of his Egyptian club mate Mo Salah, King of Egypt, after Liverpool won the Champions League. However, he faces stiff opposition from Mahrez, who won the Premier League with Manchester City and also captained Algeria, the Desert Foxes, to the Africa Cup of Nations title in July this year. The nominees were named on Sunday after being selected by a panel of technical experts from the Confederation of African Football, plus former players and also media. And Chelsea defender Antonio Rudiger demanded swift punishment for Tottenham Hotspur fans who aimed monkey noises at him on Sunday during a London derby. The stadium announcer issued 3 warnings for the racism to stop in an unprecedented move for the Premier League. Tottenham vowed to take strongest possible action and said they will conduct a thorough investigation. The latest high-profile incident of racism at an English stadium led to calls from the Players' Union for a government inquiry to hasten the search for solutions along the police and officials across soccer. Tottenham forward Son Heung-min had been sent off after a second-half clash involving Rudiger moments earlier in the game with Chelsea that ended with the Chelsea win 2-0. And Jamaican sprinting great Usain Bolt ran on the track at Tokyo's newly completed National Stadium on Saturday during an event to celebrate the opening of the venue set to be centerpiece of next year's Olympics. Bolt, the 8-time Olympic gold medalist, jogged around the track as part of a relay race in front of an audience of approximately 60,000 people. Work on the stadium was finished in November, 9 months before it hosts the Olympic opening ceremony in July 2020. And Uganda, performance horse riding or equestrian sports are known as a pastime for the wealthy. But in recent years, well-off Ugandans have started to embrace equestrian sports with hopes of competing international games. Halima Thumani reports from Wakiso.
Adrico Jackson started working in a stable after failing to raise tuition to complete high school. Little did he know he would represent Uganda in May at the cross-country equestrian games in Gilgil, Kenya.
I grew up in herds of cattle, where like when I could take the cattle down to the stream, I get onto the bull back and then coming out and then I chase them. And then I didn't know that, okay, I was preparing myself maybe in the future to start riding our horses like this. So now, again, going out there to compete, as a builder-up, has so many relationships for me.
Flame Tree Stables owner Miranda Bowser bought her first 22 horses from South Africa in 1997 to teach ordinary Ugandans horse riding. Since then, she says, Ugandans are learning not just to ride horses, but also to perform. With the right support, says Bowser, Uganda could soon compete with the International Federation for Equestrian Sports.
Hopefully their level of riding will grow and rise as they compete inter-Africally. So there's nothing to say that we couldn't, with the right sponsorship, get a team of Ugandans to go and compete in Zimbabwe or compete in South Africa or to go to Zambia or Namibia, where there's all FEI-affiliated competitions going on.
The Uganda Equestrian Association was formed in 2016 and became affiliated with the Uganda Olympic Committee, raising hopes for more support for international competition. President of the association, Kenneth Opedon, says though the sport is growing, there are still some barriers to overcome. Many Ugandans still see performance riding as a sport for rich people, he says, and the country needs a proper national horse arena to gain public support.
So we are planning to do a very serious stable there where we have an arena that is of world standard, and where we also get to inviting more people to come and do riding and what at a lesser cost.
Opedun says they've just one more hurdle to jump, getting certification with Uganda's National Council of Sports to be able to apply for affiliation with the International Federation for Equestrian Sports. Meanwhile, Uganda's jockeys in May will still compete in Kenya against the host and other well-known equestrian African countries such as Namibia, South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe. Halima Athmani for VOA News, Wakiso, Uganda.
Well, less wealthy has a chance too to do that sport. Thanks a lot to Halima Athmani. And that wraps our sports for today. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Sunday. Great sport today. All right. Join Sunday Shomari next Monday for another Africa 54 Sports Report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.